Shalom and welcome to Simchat Yisrael. In this week's parsha, our father Jacob is in the last hours of his life. He calls for his 12 sons to come to him so he can give them his final instructions. Once they're gathered, Jacob says something mysterious and exciting. He says, "Gather together so that I can tell you what will happen to you in the last days." This is Jared Eaton from Simchat Yisrael, and today I want to take a closer look at a prophecy so amazing and so accurate that skeptics insist that it had to have been written 1,000 years later. A prophecy that not only gives us a preview into the future story of God in Israel, but also points to Messiah Yeshua. Before we begin, please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel down below. Jacob prophesies over all 12 of his sons, but we're only going to focus on 5 of them: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, and Joseph. Jacob begins with his eldest son, Reuben. He says, "Reuben, you are my firstborn, my might, the first sign of my strength, excelling in honor, excelling in power. Turbulent as the waters, you will no longer excel. For you went up onto your father's bed, onto my couch and defiled it." Jacob is referring to an incident in Genesis 35. We read that Reuben committed adultery with Jacob's concubine Bilhah, the mother of Dan and Naphtali. Jacob's favorite wife, Rachel, had just died after giving birth to Benjamin. Jacob favored Rachel's children over the children he had with Leah, even though those sons were older. After Rachel's death, Jacob showered even more attention on Joseph and Benjamin. Reuben, feeling his position as the firstborn son was undermined, goes behind his father's back and sleeps with his concubine to prove that all his father's property, including his wives and concubine, were his by right. Because of his rash and disrespectful choice, Jacob loses all respect for his eldest son and strips him of his rights as the firstborn. And now, Jacob prophesies that both Reuben and his tribe after him will no longer excel. Throughout the Hebrew scriptures, the tribe of Reuben is never excellent in any way. No great prophet, judge, or king ever comes from the tribe of Reuben. The Reubenites choose not to enter the land of Canaan with Joshua, instead settling for the good enough land east of the Jordan. In the book of Judges, when Deborah calls on the tribes for aid, Reuben refuses to answer the call and hides among the sheep. When Moses is blessing the 12 tribes at the end of his life, he's worried about Reuben's population and thinks they might even die out for lack of numbers. There is nothing excellent about this tribe. Reuben's birthrights will be distributed among his other brothers, and he will be counted as just another one of the sons. It doesn't get much better for the next two, Simeon and Levi, who Jacob groups together when he prophesies over them. Jacob tells them, "Simeon and Levi are brothers. Their swords are weapons of violence. Let me not enter their council. Let me not join their assembly. For they have killed men in their anger and hamstrung oxen as they pleased." Jacob is referring to the notorious incident of the rape of Dinah in Genesis 34, where in revenge for their sister's honor, Simeon and Levi cruelly deceive and massacre the inhabitants of an entire town. As a result, the family of Jacob was disgraced, and on his deathbed, Jacob curses Simeon and Levi for their anger and violence. He prophesies that these two tribes will become scattered and separated throughout the land of Israel. And they will, but in 2 completely different ways. In the book of Numbers, there are 2 censuses taken, with about 35 years in between. In the first census, Simeon is the largest of the clans, with 59,300 fighting men. 35 years later, when they take the second census, Simeon's numbers have dropped to 22,200 men. 63% of Simeon's population died in the wilderness, and they end the Exodus as the smallest and weakest of the tribes. When the tribes enter Canaan, Simeon is given a portion of the land, but its borders are entirely encompassed by the much larger territory of Judah. Over time, Simeon will be completely absorbed into Judah and lose its tribal distinctiveness. Levi, on the other hand, is among the most successful of the tribes. Moses and Aaron were Levites. The tribe of Levi was honored by God to act as his holy priesthood. Where Jacob's prophecy is a curse for Simeon, it's a blessing for Levi. The Levites don't receive their own territory in Israel, but instead they are given special cities in every tribe so that the Levite priests could serve all the nation. They were scattered, but in a good way. For the tribe of Levi to reach its full potential, it needed to be separated from its brother. Without Simeon's bad influence, Levi is able to become a blessing to his family instead of a curse. Next up is Judah. And if I'm Judah, I'm not feeling too good right now. Judah has a lot to be worried about. It was Judah's idea to sell Joseph into slavery. Judah slept with his own daughter-in-law. So Judah must have been pleasantly surprised when Jacob says, "Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, Judah." The difference between Judah and his brothers is that he learns from his mistakes and becomes a better person for having made them. He may have sold Joseph, but years later, he offers his own life in return for Benjamin's. He may have slept with Tamar, but he acknowledged his sin and his responsibility and did right by her afterwards. Being a great leader doesn't mean that you won't make mistakes. It means that you will grow from them. Because of the leadership he displays, Judah is elevated among his brothers and receives a portion of the firstborn's blessing. He now has the right to be called the leader of his brothers and is given the symbol of the lion, a symbol of royalty and strength that is still associated with Israel today. Jacob says that Judah's descendants will become kings, speaking of a scepter and a ruling staff that his tribe will hold. Jacob is speaking this while the tribe of Israel was just 12 guys and their wives. This prophecy is so far-sighted that it wouldn't be fulfilled for 640 years until David of the tribe of Judah is anointed king of Israel. But then Jacob makes a statement that is still not fully understood today. He says, "The scepter shall not depart from Judah until Shiloh comes." Jewish tradition teaches that Shiloh refers to a future messianic king who will assume the crown of Judah. And while Judaism doesn't recognize Yeshua as a Messiah, Yeshua fulfills this prophecy in every way. From the time of David all the way until the Herodian dynasty, a prince of Judah was always head over Israel. Even when governed by foreign masters, Israel always had a limited right to self-rule. But in 7 CE, the Roman government took away King Herod's right to pronounce capital punishment. For Jews, this was a spiritual disaster. The last vestige of kingship had been removed from Judah. Talmud says that rabbis would walk the streets of Jerusalem crying, "Woe unto us, for the scepter has been taken away from Judah, and Shiloh has not come." What they didn't know was maybe at that very moment, a 12-year-old boy was entering the temple and amazing the Torah scholars with his understanding. The scepter had been removed, but Shiloh had come. Yeshua, the son of David, of the tribe of Judah, had come to claim his crown. There is one problem, though. Jacob may have promised the crown to Judah, but at this moment, Judah is not the leader of his brothers. He is not the authority among them, and he does not carry the blessings of the firstborn son. All of that belongs to Joseph. Jacob saves the longest and most praise-filled prophecy for his favorite son. He calls Joseph a fruitful vine and prophesies that above all his brothers, Joseph will be blessed with wealth and success. And at the end of his prophecy, Jacob says that all of these blessings shall be on the head of Joseph and on the crown of the head of the prince among his brethren. Jacob calls Joseph the prince and even says that he is the one who wears a crown, not Judah. But if Joseph is the prince, how can Judah inherit leadership? How can Yeshua, the lion of the tribe of Judah, inherit his crown? In the Talmud, there is a midrash that I believe answers this question. Scripture tells us that Jacob was buried in a place called the threshing floor of the thorn bushes. And the rabbis ask, why was this place called by this strange name? The midrash says that when the children of Israel came into the land to bury their father, the kings of Canaan all gathered together to attack them. But when the kings of all these Gentile nations arrived, they saw Joseph take off his crown and place it on the coffin of Jacob. Joseph was the second most powerful man in the world, second only to Pharaoh, and this humble act moved them so much that all of these kings took off their own crowns and placed them around the coffin of Jacob. And the midrash says that it resembled a crown of thorns around Jacob's grave. Yeshua was able to inherit the crown of his ancestor Judah because Joseph gave up his own crown. He laid it on his father's grave and allowed Judah to become the leader he was meant to be. But it wasn't just Joseph who laid down his crown. Just like in the book of Revelation, the kings of the nations all cast their crowns down before the crown of Shiloh, the Prince of Peace, and together they formed a crown of thorns. Messiah Yeshua still has that crown today. God revealed the destiny of the sons of Jacob to them on that day so long ago, and their shared destiny led them to the feet of Yeshua. Shalom, and thanks for watching. If you like this video, please subscribe. And don't forget to visit simchatyisrael.org to learn more.